Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I hope everything is okay in your life. This video series has been prepared for general features of the classes in BDO to be conveyed to you by the Classmasters in appropriate way. The information contained in this video is limited and will not be a detailed guide. In the content you will meet, there will be an interview about the structure of the class in general. If you have friends around you who have questions about this class, they will probably be able to find general answers. The purpose of interview is to convey the class to you in a short and fun way. First, you will watch official trailer of the class, then we will start chatting with our guests. During the chat, I will add as many images as possible and try to provide you with a better information transfer. I hope you enjoy these contents. All these and similar classes will be completed and published in time. If you do not want to miss the moment when they are published, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button. Enjoy watching. Well, hello. Welcome, guys. Today's guest is Huntler for Wizard class. Welcome, Huntler. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much. May you please introduce yourself?
Go by Huntler in game and my streams, or basically any game I play. I'm 32 years old. I've been playing BDO since just before it launched on the NA and EU servers. I ended up playing the Russian server when it came out about 6 months, I think, before NA and EU released. Ended up playing it on the Russian server for a while with some friends just to kind of experience the game. And I've been playing ever since. And, when it was coming to NA, I obviously swapped. And then, of course, I live in the United States, so I play on the NA server since it's come out.
How did you find BDO? From a friend? Website? How you go into MMORPG games? How did you decide to play this game?
Probably the same way. Generally, when it comes to MMOs, it always seems to be the same way I find it, is a group of friends. I have a lot of different friends that I've played MMOs with over the years. Typically, we played PvP MMOs together. Someone finds out about it, or finds out about a new MMO coming out. In this case, I had a group of friends who had heard about BDO, heard about certain features of BDO, such as like the open world PvP, being able to flag up and kill people, guild wars, things like that. When they found out about it, they said it's coming eventually. Yeah, I think at the time it was like 8 months out, but it's launching on a Russian server soon. Let's go try it and see if it's fun. So that's basically how I found BDO. Was just a group of friends that said, let's try it, see if we like it, and we all ended up playing on the Russian server. We liked it, so we played it when it came live to NA.
So how many years have you been playing your class? Is this your first class? Are there any other classes that you started the game with or tried?
So very briefly, I guess, because I brought up the Russian server thing. I'm a mage one way or the other, whether it was witch or wizard over the years on NA. But I technically started on a sorc on the Russian server. When I was first getting into the game or looking at it, as I mentioned before, when my friend showed it to me, I was trying to figure out what class looked good to me, and I definitely saw on the Korean server by then, witch and wizard were already out. I've always liked playing support classes, and that was the closest thing this game has had to a support class, at least at the time. So I knew I was going to play a mage, regardless. But the Russian server didn't launch with a mage, so I'm like, what else do I launch with? Or what else could I play that looks good? They didn't really have a lot starting classes for the Russian server, or as many as they did for NA and EU. But I typically like casters, so I was like, oh, let's play sorceress. That's a caster, right? The name says sorceress. I ended up enjoying it, but it wasn't really what I expected by the name. The name sorceress implies a caster, and it kind of is a caster, but it's more like a melee brawler. But I enjoyed it. But when I came to NA, they launched with Witch Wizard, so I just picked Witch because Witch and Wizard at the time were identical. And I played Witch all the way up until Successions were released. And at that point, I swapped to Wizard because I'd kind of gotten bored, and playstyle of Awakening Mage by then had gotten stale to me. And when I heard they were creating this whole new build, or like this whole new kit for classes, I knew I wanted to swap to Succession. I was going to do it no matter what. How pet damage worked at the time, and playstyle of Awakening had gotten stale. So Successions came out, and I'm a PvP focused player, and when Successions came out, they kind of did Witch a bit dirty. Its Succession, when it first came out, was basically unplayable in PvP. It ended up taking like 8 to 10 months, I think, to even remotely put it in the same like hemisphere as Suck Wizard, and even then Suck Wizard was broken. But even just to make it playable, it was, if people remember, when Suck Witch first released, it was lacking the chaining of skills into fast casting. It didn't have the protected side dash. All it had was the double TP, not the split TP that Wizards had, and it just was dead on arrival, unfortunately. So I wanted to play that style, though, fast, aggressive. So I swapped to Wizard at that time, and I've been Wizard ever since.
So it's good to hear you. Do you think your class is newbie friendly? How would you rate your class out of 10 in terms of difficulty in PvP, also and PvE?
So yes, I think my class is pretty newbie friendly. I've always had the opinion generally MMOs aren't designed to be like, super hard for anyone to get into or play. Certainly BDO's combat and PvP mechanics is a step up from your typical MMO. Generally, the game is designed to be newbie friendly, and mages in particular, I think, are, particularly Awakening. And then Succession, if you're trying to be really good with the PvP, there's a lot of like little tiny hidden tricks or knowledges you have to learn. But at the end of the day, these are things you can learn in the course of a couple weeks of playing the class. You get the muscle memory down. Everything else, is gravy at that point. I don't think the class is hard to pick up. How would I rate it out of 10? Let's say about a 5 for PvE then. 4 or 5. It's not hard.
Okay.
It's quite simple. And then PvP, let's put about a 7 or 8. Sorry. I was thinking strength.
So, do you prefer Awakening or Succession right now, and why?
So I'm a PvP focused player. That's mostly what I care about. So I prefer Succession. The reason being is probably twofold in the current state of the game. But generally, I like the Succession style more. Even more so after the reworks, funnily enough. Even though obviously, pre-reworks and pre the Succession nerfs, Suck Wizard was completely broken. I like what they did with Succession with the reworks. They made Succession its own more unique playstyle. It's still in a very aggressive playstyle, but it's like a ranged focus kite class, as opposed to what it was before the reworks and before the nerfs, where even as a Succession mage, you were basically a bomber, just like Awakening is, except Awakening is like a turret, very immobile, can't move between TPs, while Succession can. So I prefer Succession. I like the style more, but then my second reason is, fortunately these days, Awakening in PvP has fallen off pretty heavily. It's hard to make it work outside of really big ball fights. My favorite form of PvP is open world small scale. Succession is definitely far more suited for that kind of PvP.
Most of people know, and you know, I published a PV tier lists about all classes. May you please analyze this wizard page in general?
So I was taking a look, and I think it's actually pretty spot on when it comes for across the board for both Awakening and Succession. In general, these days, Awakening is considered the stronger PvE spec on both Witch and Wizard. It's not even close compared to Succession. Succession PvE is pretty weak. Its only value is its high mobility. So you'll rarely see mages in the open world grinding on Succession. It almost never happens. The only times you'll see it are maybe in really early game grind spots where high mobility is very valuable. Succession mages, if they're grinding the pot piece, for example, and they have really good gear, if they're going to Cagtums and they're one-shotting packs, it can be valuable to, do a single TP, kill the pack in one nuke, TP to the next pack, kill it one nuke, TP the next pack, and so on and so forth. But Succession falls off very heavily in terms of sustained DPS on any kind of tanky or high HP mobs. And so all your numbers on Succession PvE are spot on. It's very weak in PvE, unfortunately, and that's probably the one thing I'm constantly asking for buffs for is PvE buffs for Succession. Awakening, on the other hand, it's great across the board. It's not a god tier PvEer, but it's very good in early grind spots. It loves dense grind spots, which are most of the popular grind spots these days anyway. Its end game grinding is very good still. Again, not god tier. It's not like top 5 or anything like that, but across the board, I would say Awakening is above average, with the added benefit of it's very comfortable to play. It's not a lot of key inputs. It's a very consistent, a comfortable grind. It's one of those classes you can grind with and have like a stream on the other monitor or a movie or a TV show and kind of relax. And it's just I think Awakening across the board, it can perform well in almost any aspect of PvE, whether it's early game, end game, whatever you're kind of trying to grind. So I would say this is actually pretty spot on the tier or the guide list you have here.
Let's talk about Awakening PvP 1v1, 1vx, 5v5, large scale. What is the potential of this class?
As most people already know, 1v1s on Awakening, for both of them, it's not their forte. Wizard is a bit better for a couple reasons than Witch. Mostly stems from a couple of the differences in skills and the fact that Wizard has a grab. But generally, these classes are basically turret bombers. They're not really designed to handle 1v1s. Most classes in the game faster than them, and with grabs, it makes the Awakening Mage a very easy grab target. And that's when it comes to 1v1s, your life revolves around essentially protecting yourself and making sure the person 1v1ing you doesn't grab you. That's probably your priority number 1, 2, and 3. And then if you're obviously fighting someone that doesn't have a grab, you're much happier. Both classes in Awakening, their PvP kits aren't designed well around 1v1s. They tend to fare pretty poorly. I don't recommend it, let's say. Actually, let's start with the easy one. So Awakening Mage's best PvP, both Witch and Wizard, is definitely large scale. As I mentioned before, they're large AoE bombers with actually very good damage. I think a lot of people these days post reworks because of where time to kill is at with a lot of classes. It feels like Awakening Mage damage, some people forget how strong it is, maybe because it comes out a little slower. But if you let an Awakening Mage basically drop AoEs on top of people, a lot of people are going to die. It's very strong. The trick is being able to do that. What helps make an Awakening Mage be able to basically do what they're good at are large scale fights. They want clumps of people. They want protection, so it's not as easy to pick them out alone. So we're talking ball fights, GVGs, Node Wars, and Sieges. That's where an Awakening Mage excels. An Awakening Mage wants to be able to, double TP or single TP into an enemy pack, rotate their bomb combo, and maybe get out with an elementalization or another TP, depending on what they're doing, move around a bit, and then bomb again. The damage is very relevant when they're able to drop it. As we start to go to smaller scale from that, I think Awakening Mage can actually still do pretty well in like small scale, anything from like a 5v5 to a 10v10. But again, how you play now changes. When we talk large scale, the biggest strength of Awakening is bombing. As you start to go to small scale, it's no longer about you being offensive. And this probably goes from everything from small scale all the way down to 1v1s. Awakening Mage really needs to play more defensive orientated. They try to capitalize off of mistakes and catches instead of, let's say, bombing into someone. When it comes to small scale, it's a lot harder to just double TP into one or two people, hope you can get your damage off and not get punished for it. In a large scale combat, when you've got 20 people going this way, 20 people going that way, it's a lot harder to keep track. You're not as at risk of someone immediately turning on you and saying, hey, this is the easy grab, you just TP'd next to me, right? So small scale, I find that Awakening mages succeed more when they're kind of just being almost an anchor for their side, their team, whatever that is. And just focusing on protecting themselves, particularly from grabs. And then if their team ends up getting any picks or they get any picks themselves, they focus on capitalizing it. Make sure you're buffing up your friends, give them a speed spell, heals when you can, and look for picks.
I think that's enough for Awakening. So let's talk about Succession. What about PvE Succession? Early game, mid game, end game. What is the potential? And I know you said this class needs buffs. What they should buff on this class for proper PvE?
Yeah, so generally, kind of what I said before, Succession PvE is painful almost the entire way down. In early game grind spots, it's not that bad. Basically, any spot where you can 1 or 2 shot packs. Like I did my potion piece grinding on Succession, and I found that pretty comfortable. And I thought it was good because the difference between 1 and 2 shotting packs and then being able to split TP from pack to pack, or if I was Awakening, like Awakening doing more damage doesn't matter if you're 1 or 2 shotting the packs, right? So with Succession, because I was doing it on Wizard, you have split TP. I could essentially very quickly move from pack to pack. Any grind spot where every pack is within 1 TP of each other is ideally suited. So things like Cactums, Sherikon, Renaros, those all worked really well. All the packs were generally 1 to 2 shottable. All were within 1 TP of each other. So I could TP, kill the pack, TP, kill the pack. Works great. Where Succession, like I said before, really, really heavily falls off is anywhere you need sustained DPS. So we're basically the end game grind spots. It's significantly worse than Awakening in terms of sustained DPS in that front. You basically will end up running out of cooldowns and still not doing good DPS anyway. And so when it comes to buffs, what I would say is just the easiest buff is just to buff the damage itself on some skills. But they could do some other things. They designed Succession in a very specific way, a kind of a unique way when it came to Succession for mages, is that we have kind of 2 different specs you can go. You have 2 versions of almost every one of your Succession skills. For example, Fireball Explosion, your typical mage spell, there's 2 Succession versions of it. The same with Residual, the same with, Lightning Storm, the same with Meteor and Earthquake. Generally speaking, it was very clear that one of those skills tends to be very good for PvE and one of them tends to be for PvP. They could take advantage of that by then tailoring it even more, but just even the PvE skills just are very weak right now. They lack sustained, why I say lack of sustained DPS is because you can't keep rotating it because of how the cooldowns work. Basically, like I said, run out of cooldowns and the damage isn't good enough. And in the time it takes, you've done 3 rotations of all your skills to kill 1 pack. You can watch a striker have killed that pack in 3 more packs. Like it's pretty rough. And I'm not saying we need to be the best, but if you look by the numbers, Succession Wizard is well below average. It's in the dumps. I don't recommend anyone grinds on Succession. If they've ever watched me, they know I do grind on Succession, but that's not because it's good. I don't grind. The reason being is I don't grind much anymore, and when I do grind, I'm typically doing it on Arsha, and I'm typically encouraging people to come stream snipe me because I like the PvP aspect of it. So I'd rather be able to immediately PvP than grind on Awakening. But if I was to seriously grind for a long period of time, it's Awakening. It's very comfortable, good above average numbers compared to other classes. Succession is just not really it. I think the second you get out of early game grind spots that are one-shottable, just doesn't work very well.
What about Session PvP? 1v1 potential, 1vx, and large scale. And also, I don't know, Solar, by the way.
Strong across the board. So Succession is definitely, since it's been since I'm focusing on Succession the last few years, I'm definitely more familiar with it in the current meta. Succession Mage can be played well across the board. It's definitely, technically, its weakest is 1v1, where we start. However, it's really just a matter of who you're fighting. If we assume, equal skill, equal game knowledge, equal gear, all the usual stuff, Suck Mage is actually quite good, but there are certain classes that will just straight obliterate you and there's not much you can do about it. So that's why I would say 1v1 is our weakest, but we're not necessarily bad at it. the gauntlet classes, there's almost nothing you can do.
We all hate we all hate them.
Yeah, it's just the game design in terms of both the class mods and Succession Mage's weaknesses. Gauntlets basically are very hard to kill, even if you outplay them and CC them multiple times. Suck Mage's one of our biggest weaknesses is accuracy. So going up against evasion can be difficult. All of the bread and butter skills, all the bread and butter DPS skills on Wizard and Witch have no accuracy mods on them. Fireball, Explosion, 0. Residual 0. I think 10% on high voltage. Our biggest damage is actually an awakening skill against evasion, which is Bolide. Most people use Bolide. I think what ended up happening there is originally Succession Mage was designed around Voltaic, and Voltaic in Succession used to be a heavy evasion debuff. And when they nerfed that, you can't really run Voltaic anymore. In most PvP, the class isn't really designed for it anymore. It doesn't have as strong evasion buff. They kind of forgot that. I think the class was balanced around the fact originally that, or thought of originally, I wouldn't even say balanced because it was broken back then, but not because of the evasion debuff in my opinion. Because they had that evasion debuff, you wouldn't give the class a bunch of accuracy mods at the same time. That would have been incredibly broken. So it didn't have them. You basically have to play around that as a PvP mage, understanding most of my skills don't have very high accuracy. So classes like I said, the gauntlet classes make your life miserable. And do you sacrifice a lot of your gear to try and deal with it, and even then still not do great? It's a tough case. And then there's certain other classes. A lot of the shield classes can give you trouble. Warriors, another one of those really hard classes for you to deal with. But a good Suck Mage, I'll say this on the flip side for 1v1, can effectively win a lot of 1v1s and outplay their opponents. They have outplay potential. Suck Mage is in a really good state in terms of, I think, the whole game. And I can move on to it's a very good 1vx class. You're very good at brawling. Both Suck Wizard a little bit more than Suck Witch, I think, and it's mostly because of the split TP. The 1vxing is doable. It takes gear. You basically need to get to the point where you can quickly kill someone in a handful of skills, because you're looking to TP, catch someone, combo quickly, TP, kite, keep moving. It's your whole life. Whether it's 1vxing, small scale, whatever. The state of the game is that you're not tanking anything. If anyone gets up to you, most of the DPS classes are going to outtrade you. You're now basically a kiter that's looking to get range picks and then punishing. Make it tough for people to catch you and get to you. You take advantage of your split TP, you take advantage of your slows, and you're constantly moving. A stationary Suck Mage is an immediately dead Suck Mage with the current state of mobility and, obviously grabs and things like that. You're always looking to be keeping distance between you and your opponents. But because of that, because of this tech you have, where you have multiple TPs that are fast, burst mobility, protected, decent range catch CCs, you're looking to quickly move from spot to spot, catch someone, capitalize, move again, get people to chase you, and punish them when they try to chase you.
Let's talk about game itself. What do you think about BDO for current situation from past until now?
And when it comes to the MMO sphere as well, has left its mark. I think every good MMO should, and I'm biased towards PvP MMOs, but I always think back to, played a lot over the years. It seems like all the good ones have always brought at least one major innovation that brought people to the table. And I say major innovation. Sometimes it can be a minor one, but that the benefit of it ended up being very valuable. BDO, I think, yes, most people are going to say the combat system was their very large contribution to the MMO scene that makes it hard to go back. And I imagine, should more MMOs come out in the future that get investment, they'll be looking at potentially emulating at least some of what BDO introduced there. That's one of their big innovations. I think, you could look at other stuff like their life skilling system is very innovative and stuff like that, but that's the big stuff. What I think about BDO currently is what I just mentioned is probably why BDO is still alive. It's still successful. Anytime it comes up of why people still play this game when they tried other games, everyone's answer always seems to come back that, whatever new came out that filled that itch for people when it comes to MMOs. At least that's the people I run with, the communities I'm a part of. That's the biggest thing I've ever seen, is that one innovation that they started this game with has kept people with this game for so long, and it's likely why the game is still alive and has an active player base.
I can say they are better than past, especially solving some problems.
Oh,
They
absolutely.
still have major problems, minor problems, and I think the main problem is they don't know where they exactly focus.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's actually a really good point. They do sometimes seem a little bit all over the place, and they'll say they commit to something and like, okay, we realize this is a problem, we're committing to it. And it always feels like they'll start to work on that, and then they'll kind of like either release a half-assed version of it and then move on to something else, like making additions and features to the game that they've promised or think would be good for the game. But you're also
Mhm.
right. I actually have to give credit where credit's due. I think it started maybe a bit over a year ago. I think PA has done a really good job. Quality of life features that this game sorely needed for years, probably, and features that make it easier for players who stopped playing or new players to catch up. Completely 100% in support of features like that. This game's gear curve without it would have been ridiculous. You would never be able to get new players. And I know there's always at least a vocal minority that complains that, well, you're making it easier for players to catch up to all the work I put in. But if you don't do that, the game dies. We're at a state of the game now where I've literally watched this happened recently with a friend of mine in my guild. Guy came back to the game, started fresh basically on seasonal, and is
Uh-huh.
now 720 gear score without swiping. He just
Yeah.
grinded it out. It took him about, let's say, 5 to 6 months. I don't expect everyone to do that, but to be even able to do that in today's day, like when that would have taken years, like many years, and probably swiping anyway to get to previously, it's a really big deal. You can now, because of seasonals and different mechanics, get to at least a competitive state. 680, 690 is not that, doesn't take that long.
So if you have a chance to add new feature to BDO or change something, what would it be?
So many things. I'm sure like a popular answer to this is probably let's rebalance or whatnot, but missed opportunity I think with PA is just their development cycle and how they
Uh-huh.
monetize this game. Clearly, their monetization strategy has worked because PA originally went from this small indie company to $1 billion company off of the back of BDO. So clearly, their
Uh-huh.
monetization strategy worked. In some ways, their monetization strategy isn't necessarily what's best for the player, and I'm not saying that they should stop that because they are a company. They're trying to make money. They should do what works. But I would love for them to expand and try to monetize the game in an additional way that maybe is more enjoyable for the player. So what do I mean by that? Currently, their biggest monetization strategy seems to be making or having people re-roll new classes. It's why they release a new class every quarter. They spend a lot of development time on it. If there's one thing they're super consistent about always reaching, it's a new class every quarter or pretty damn close.
Mhm.
It's definitely seems to be their top priority, and it's no surprise that's where they make their most money. Then most of their other time is spent on small features like quality of life features or whatnot, and then maybe once or twice a year we get some big content release. So when I say I want them to change how their development cycle works, it would be talking about maybe we tweak the time spent on new classes and that big content. What could that time be spent working on? So that new content usually is the winter region or
Yeah.
Odraxia or something. It's probably no surprise for people if they've been playing the game long enough that they'll realize these new regions take a lot of development time, a lot of localization time. They tend to not have a lot of replay value to them. Most of the new
Mhm.
regions end up being dead within a month or two. Usually what players do is they'll do the quest that takes them through there because there's some rewards that are worth doing. Maybe there's a grind spot that has something you want, like in the winter region, hey, I need to get my Fallen God helmet. Let me go grind that out. But generally, and this is even if they put a good grind spot that's actually decent end game money in this location, it rarely the entire effort of building a whole new region rarely has what I would call the value that makes it worth the time they spent developing it. I would love if they maybe thought about, instead of spending a significant part of their big year development capital, because obviously
Uh-huh.
developing a region is a big deal, and I'm sure it's expensive. They're having to build entire new assets. They got voice actors for the winter region. They basically turned it into a mini movie. Like, this takes time and money. I would love if they took that time and said, what if we change our development cycle for this and our big content release was instead some kind of focus on content that our players could repeatedly do and maybe is a bit different. So instead of just releasing a region with a couple new grind spots that just are basically, go in a new circle again, and a quest that you do once, what if we released The perfect example of an idea they scrapped would be Thornwood Castle. They never really told us why they scrapped Thornwood Castle, and for those who don't know what Thornwood Castle is, it was something that PA was working on for well over a year that was essentially supposed to be kind of a group encounter that pitted two groups of BDO players against each other in both a PvE/PvP-esque like challenge, almost like a mini MOBA, where you would traverse this maze and kill mobs, and if you ran into each other, you could fight each other for power-ups and stuff like that. They didn't tell us too much on that, but they were more than that, but they were working on it for well over a year, and they ended up scrapping it because it didn't work. The idea there, I think, was good. I'm open to any kind of ideas, whether it's a purely PvE focused, PvP focused, a mix, any kind of content that I think we could benefit more from something like that than a new region these days. The new regions, just we've done it so many times. It doesn't really seem to keep the game alive to me. If anything, it buys us a couple weeks of content at best. I would love for some kind of content that they could create that the focus was, how can we create something that's fun and engaging repeatably, that people will want to keep coming back and doing this. Added bonus if it's a social aspect that requires, doesn't require it, but maybe encourages you to play with other players, whether they're friends, guildies, whatever.
What are your advices for newbies, returnees, or whoever wants to re-roll Wizard?
I can give advice both to people focused on Wizard and then just in general, I think. First, let's start in general in case anyone's just coming back or new to the game entirely. First piece of advice I always give new players is, especially new players, if you're a returning player, you already kind of understand the basic concept of BDO, but if you're a completely new player, take the game one step at a time. The game can feel pretty overwhelming at first, especially if it's like you're new to an in-depth MMO that goes like really deep in some directions, which BDO does. They've definitely improved that over the years. The game can feel pretty overwhelming if you're new to this game. You just started, you're like, I just started playing the game. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Wait, I'm supposed to level up. Wait, there's no max caps or soft caps. Guides are telling me I should set up a worker empire. What's these life skills? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Wait, how I'm supposed to be able to PvP? There's a lot to kind of take in all at once when you first become this game. It feels like you need to do it all at once, especially when you ask people advice or read guides. It's like, you should do this, 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 and it's a list a mile long. Take it slow. It's not a big deal. Don't feel overwhelmed. Focus at one thing at a time. Take it one step at a time. Set a goal for yourself. Let me hit level 56. Let me see what Awakening is all about. Make that your goal. Maybe after that, say, hey, I heard I should set up a worker empire and start making some passive income that way. Go do that. Go learn that. Go figure that out. Set yourself the next goal. And then when it comes to general returning players, take advantage of all the tools that PA has put in the game now in terms of both quality of life improvements and catch-up mechanics. Some of them are not well advertised. Definitely ask friends advice who are still playing. You can look for guides. Definitely try to look for newer guides because things have changed over even the last year. A lot of things have changed, but there's a lot of catch-up mechanics that are not very well advertised. I know a bunch of returning players I knew just several months back still didn't know that you can get essentially a much cheaper, almost quest pen crescent ring, for example, or pen narc earring, or it's not advertised. There's nowhere where it really kind of the game just kind of points you to it. If you didn't know that this is a thing and that it's a daily quest that you work towards over time, and they only found out because it got mentioned haphazardly in comms at some point. And that's just like one small example. Seasonals are very valuable. Doing them, as a returning player, even if you have a class that's technically as geared as a seasonal or better when you return, there's a lot of benefits to still doing the seasonal.
So, we are coming towards the end of the interview. And is there anything you would like to add?
I think generally, what I could add about both mages in general, I think the classes are in a pretty good state. I do hope PA continues to support, both from a content perspective and a balance perspective, the game, both in PvE and PvP. I think, if we were to have this interview 2 years ago, I'd probably be saying the same thing in terms of that, hoping keep supporting and keep trying to tweak the game to make it better and more enjoyable for people. On the PvP side, I've always felt PA balances with a chainsaw and a machete instead of a scalpel. And I guess if there's one thing I'd like to add, I think in coming balance patches, I hope they try to take the latter approach. For better or worse, when there's a OP class that's released and PA finally nerfs it, they tend to cut off a limb instead of dialing it back. And as much as I hate the next OP class that's just dominating, and as everyone does, we take Suck Drac, for example, I also don't think it's fair to then gut a class to irrelevancy just because it was OP. I think PA should, if they took more measured approaches to balance and said, well, we think this class is outperforming, we think this class is underperforming. What if we just did this minor tweak here or there see how things play out. Let's change this damage by 5% instead of 50%, and then remove and double the stamina cost of this. They seem to always go very heavy-handed, and I would love to see them on average take a much more subtle approach, slowly dial things in. I think we would have a better experience in PvP than these wild balance shifts that just completely throw the game out of whack.
So I want to say thank you to Huntler. He accepted my invitation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Alright guys, do not forget, video is just a game. Have a nice game.